Philip Turle, who joins me on this set. Philip, now this is an official visit. Talk us through a bit more about what's going to be on the agenda.
Okay, it's an official visit, so this is not just Yoav Gallant, the Israeli Defence Minister, turning up to have a friendly chat. This has been organised for weeks. He's going to be meeting with the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, with the Defence Secretary, Lloyd Austin, and with the Director of the CIA, William Burns, the three major partners who are discussing the action US support for Israel. This is all, as you said, coming at a particularly difficult time for relations between the United States and Israel. First of all, over the situation in Gaza. Now, what Yoav Gallant is saying here is quite interesting. He's saying what he wants to talk about is the so-called Phase 3 in Gaza. Now, Phase 3 is the reconstruction of Gaza. Now, remember that it was President Biden who came up with a peace proposal just over a month ago, calling for a ceasefire. That ceasefire has never actually been introduced. A three-point ceasefire deal or three-point peace proposal. Phase 3 is the reconstruction. We don't have the ceasefire yet, but they're already trying to talk about reconstruction. This follows on to what Benjamin Netanyahu was saying the other day, which was we're going to pause the fighting and now we're going to reduce the clashes that are taking place in Rafah. So I think what the Israelis are saying is we're not going to give up on trying to eradicate Hamas, but we are going to try to move a bit further forward with trying to move in a direction that's more helpful towards the people of Gaza. And remember that the latest casualty figure from Gaza is over 37,000 people dead since the attacks of the 7th of October. Now, on the other issue, which is the situation in Lebanon, I think what the Israeli Defence Ministry is planning to do is, by introducing a situation where they say they have less attacks in Gaza, they've stopped the main offensive in Rafah. They're going to move the troops from that area to the border with southern Lebanon, maybe to intensify their attacks against Hezbollah from that part of the conflict. So that appears to be what is on the menu, the discussions that are taking place. But I think there is growing concern in Washington that all of this could spiral out of control and lead to a much broader conflict in the Middle East, and that's something that is in the interest of nobody.
Right, and this issue of the lack of a ceasefire in the fighting in Gaza is really giving context to these talks today, as well as worry in the U.S. over the impact this might have on Joe Biden's re-election campaign.
Well, I think that is a major concern for Joe Biden. Now, you mentioned in your introduction the accusations by Israel over the freezing of weapons supplies to Israel from the United States. Remember, the US is the biggest supplier of weapons to Israel. The figure there is $4 billion worth of weapons a year, which are basically essential for the war effort. If those weapons didn't turn up, there wouldn't be a war in Gaza. So there is concern on the part of Israel that what they think the US is doing is freezing some of those weapons supplies. They say that should not be happening because it's going to stop them from crushing Hamas in the Gaza Strip, and they need those weapons badly. It's difficult for Joe Biden because Joe Biden has pledged to support Israel, saying Israel has a right to defend itself. And if there were another attack, for example, by Iran against Israel, and Israel didn't have the means to defend itself because the US had not been supplying those weapons, then the US obviously would come under a lot of criticism. That said, when it comes to Joe Biden, he's in a very difficult situation because he knows that if he's going to win the election this year on November the 5th against Donald Trump, then it would be in his interest that the situation in Gaza was solved and there was no longer any conflict taking there, because he's lost support by a large number of Democratic voters who don't understand why he is supporting Israel so vehemently in all of this conflict, and want Joe Biden to be much more outspoken about the way the United States is criticizing Israel. And when push comes to shove, I think this is probably the conflict since the war in Vietnam in the 1960s that has really the most affected an election campaign in the United States, more than even the Iraq War and George W. Bush in 2003. Bearing in mind the fact that up until now, not a single US soldier has been killed in the Middle East conflict, but I think there's a lot of misunderstanding in the US about exactly why Joe Biden is supporting the Israelis so strongly in all of this.
All right, Philip, thanks so much for that. That's France 24's Philip Turle.